primeiramente, Sidi Harun, é uma honra te receber aqui, não só de estar participando dessa conversa, mas também de ter possibilitado essa impressão desses livros, de ter nos dado a honra de trabalhar com seus livros. E é isso, eu vou fazer uma apresentação do Sidi Harun, né? O nome dele é Michael Sugich, mas o nome islâmico dele, ele é conhecido por Harun. Nasceu na Califórnia, estudou na Universidade da Califórnia em Los Angeles e no Instituto de Artes da Califórnia e trabalhou na juventude. Se converteu ao Islã em 72, ainda jovem, e desde então vem viajando extensamente pelo mundo islâmico. Morou por 23 anos na cidade sagrada de Meca e agora mora em Istambul, de onde está falando conosco. Trabalhou como escritor profissional por mais de 40 anos e, em 2013, publicou seu primeiro livro de temática espiritual, Sinais nos Horizontes, que a editora Bismillah agora lança em português. E no livro, Michael descreve muitos homens de conhecimento e espiritualidade a quem conheceu e relata com profundo amor e respeito suas lembranças por essas pessoas. Depois escreveu também o livro Heartstone, que inshallah a editora pretende publicar também, que terá o nome de Conversões do Coração, no qual ele conta histórias de muçulmanos convertidos. Então, muito obrigada, Michael Sugich, por essa oportunidade.
It's my
a great
honor.
pleasure and an honor.
Yeah. Same for me. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for attending. It's in the morning your time, so it's probably not the most convenient time, but thank you. Bismillah.
Sidi Harun, claro que quem está aqui com a gente não necessariamente já leu o livro, mas assim que eles lerem, muitos vão se deparar com histórias de homens que você descreve como santos. E aqui no Brasil, não é uma palavra comum que a gente escuta nas mesquitas, os muçulmanos falarem de santos, né? E pode até soar uma coisa esquisita para muitos muçulmanos. Eu gostaria que você nos explicasse o que são essas pessoas e como que elas são e como identificá-las, né, para os muçulmanos que realmente não estão acostumados com essa terminologia ou com esse conceito.
Okay, this is a really big subject, and it's one that we are addressing in the current project I'm working on with the photographer Peter Sanders. In our question, it would be better if I read from my introduction to the series that we're producing, just so I can be accurate, because it's very important that we understand what from a Muslim perspective, what we mean by a saint. All right, sainthood in Islam, or wilaya, in Arabic it's wilaya, is both explicitly and implicitly related to direct spiritual knowledge of God, of Allah, or ma'rifatullah, which results in the effacement of the ego. This knowledge is achieved, or rather in the context of purification, worship, and dhikrullah, remembrance of God, and the remembrance of God fills the heart and overcomes the ego. Remembrance has been accepted by all the people of the path since the very beginning of Islam, based upon Allah's word, dhikrullahu akbar, remembrance of Allah is the greatest. The 13th century Egyptian sage, Ibn Ata'illah al-Iskandari, wrote, "Verily, remembrance of Allah, of Ta'ala, is the key to salvation and the lamp of the souls. Through the grace of Allah, the generous, the victorious, the remembrance of Allah is the foundation of the path and the pivotal support of realized sages." In other words, the awliya, the saints. The 18th century Moroccan saint, Muli al-Arabi al-Darqawi, wrote, "Know, and may Allah be merciful to you, that when the fakir exchanges the remembrance of all things for the remembrance of Allah, his servanthood will become totally for Allah, and whoever makes his servanthood totally for Allah is a saint. He goes on to say, so do not invoke any other than Allah, and do not belong to any other than Allah, for whoever belongs to Allah, Allah belongs to him. And blessed is the one who belongs to Allah and Allah belongs. Those who have genuinely faced the ego and who are given an opening to divine knowledge become friends of God, awliya Allah, about whom the Prophet Muhammad said, when they are seen, Allah is remembered. Sheikh Salih al-Jafari wrote that the friends of God, the friends of Allah, remind you of Allah by what they have of divine attraction that pulled them to Allah, by what they have of divine attraction that pulled them to Allah, sense that made them smell beautiful, ma'arifat Allah, gnosis that made them know him, nearness that made them rare, light that shines from them, effusions that effused over them from the source of infusions. This dimension of Islam, or station of knowledge, was defined by the Prophet Muhammad as ihsan, which means excellence, but was described by him as to worship Allah as if you see him, for while you do not see him, surely he sees you. This description connotes the immanence of the divine, which is not imagined. It's not a fantasy, it's perceived. So I'm going to fall away from the text that I wrote because it's very detailed. But the point is that the wilaya is a reality among people, and it is linked to spiritual knowledge. It isn't, in the Christian sense of the word, it isn't something where someone is canonized or it's based upon miracles that are verified or whatever. It is directly tied to internal knowledge, and the awliya have this to many degrees. I mean, there are awliya who have massive, incredible knowledge, and there are awliya that are, we don't know what their station is, but there are many stations in this universe of sanctity.
Lendo o livro, né, a sensação que a gente tem é que o Marrocos dos anos 70 era um lugar que tinha muitos e muitos santos, pessoas, como você descreveu, totalmente voltadas a Allah. E eu me pergunto se você vê diferença do Marrocos de hoje em dia para esse Marrocos dos anos 70, ou se o Marrocos continua assim, e se conhecê-los é fruto realmente de alguma bênção que, de alguma forma, você teve essa abertura, né, nas suas viagens.
Right. Well, first of all, I don't think that all of Morocco at that time was teeming with saints back then, in the sense I think you mean. But the company we kept was, there were many awliya. These were the years immediately after the passing of Sheikh Muhammad ibn Habib, who was among the greatest teaching sheikhs of the 20th century and who lived a very long life. And so many of his greatest disciples were still alive, and we were lucky enough to have been able to sit with them. But even at that time, the interest in Sufism in Morocco, particularly among the young, was waning. It was falling away. We were the young people that attended, foreigners. Most of the people were, older, middle-aged and older. What we witnessed and experienced in the 1970s was the last vestige of traditional Sufism in Morocco. I remember praying in the Qarawiyyin Mosque at Maghrib back then. The mosque was full, and afterwards, fuqara from different Sufi orders would form circles and recite their awrad. And that doesn't happen anymore. I went back a few years later, and I went for Maghrib for maybe 2 prayer lines, and certainly no awrad after the prayer. So it vanished pretty quickly. Of course, there's still enormous barakah and blessing in Morocco, but it isn't the same place that it was in the 1970s. Back then, in traditional cities like Fez, Marrakesh, and Meknes, most Moroccan men and women dressed in jalabas, and many women kept the hijab, and you don't see that anymore.
Sidi Harun, quando a gente lê o seu livro, é como se a gente fosse transportado para um outro mundo, né? E eu imagino que não tenha sido diferente para você, que vinha do mundo de Hollywood e caiu direto no Marrocos, numa vida de záwia. Eu gostaria de saber como que foi essa sua experiência interior, né? Como que foi esse choque entre esses dois mundos tão diferentes.
Right. Well, I went into absolute shock when I first came to Morocco. I was only 24 years old at the time. We were there for about 3 weeks, and by the end of that time, my hair had started to go gray. You know, you know, I'd had about 1 year of practice as a Muslim and a novice on the path, but I had never in my life up to that time met men who had no interest in or traffic with the ego, right? The ego was out of the picture altogether in those gatherings. It wasn't there. And what that meant was that they didn't acknowledge my ego either. And I was really egocentric back then. Nobody cared about what I thought, you know, how I felt, who I thought I was, what my history was, what my story was. Nobody cared about anything except remembering Allah, dhikr Allah. So I found that experience uplifting, but also incredibly traumatic, because next to these people, I was a total wreck. And I felt that. And the thing is that our world has become almost completely externalized. Everything is about who you are and what you do, what you have, what people think of you, all these kinds of things. The world of the men of Allah is internalized. The only thing that's important is the condition of your heart. That's it. And when you enter into that world, it is shocking. I mean, it's a very, very different transaction you have, and then you start getting the hang of it, as you know, and you start understanding how, you know, what life is really about, and then it becomes easier, and in fact it becomes wonderful.
Sidi Harun, lendo o seu livro, acho que dos aspectos mais profundos, pelo menos na minha experiência, foi de perceber, de conseguir captar algo do seu amor pelos santos, que parece ser uma coisa muito grande. Então, eu gostaria de saber como que foi para você essa experiência, se você foi ganhando esse amor pouco a pouco, a partir da convivência que você foi tendo com esses homens muito especiais, ou se teve alguma experiência específica que deu essa abertura, né, desse amor que a gente consegue perceber.
Well, what's not to love? These are the best people in the world. You know, it's very easy to fall for them once you've met them and spent time with them. It's very easy. And as far as my own experience goes, it's probably best described in the book, on the chapter on my sheikh, my teacher, my mentor, Sayyid Omar Abdullah. And it's very important, this thing of falling in love with someone. And actually, it's very important. There's a big issue nowadays, at least on social media and about who is a real sheikh and who isn't a real sheikh and so on. And people miss the point. The whole transaction on the spiritual path is really about a love. And you know, people say they think about finding a sheikh as if they're going to the supermarket and walking down the aisles and looking for, you know, like, I'll have this one, or he looks good, you know, he dresses well, or, you know, he says nice things. But it's really not about that. It's about connecting with someone. And so it's these people are they are, Ibn Habib described and the shuyukh as like of light compared to the ocean of light of the Prophet Muhammad. Not too long ago, we were visiting our Sheikh Mulli Hashim Belghiti, and someone asked him, well, what speeds up the path? What accelerates the path? And he answered with one word, said love. Well, how do you achieve that? You achieve that by being attached to someone who you fall in love with. It's really like a love affair, but it's a spiritual love affair. So it's not difficult if you're in the right company, with the right person, because Allah guides you to the one that can guide you to Him. In other words, there's a kind of secret to that as well, so that some people don't connect with someone. It's like Sheikh Abdul Qadir Isa, who was a very great Syrian sheikh, and I spent a lot of time with him. And every time I would sit with him, he was, Harun, you must have a living sheikh. You know, he would say that. And his followers were saying, you know, you need to take an allegiance with him, bayah with him, and so on. I couldn't do it. And he never encouraged me because I didn't have this connection. There's something, and that's the other thing, is that people, they don't have self-confidence. You have Allah gives every individual the capacity to take the path. Whether they do it or not is another issue, but you have everything in you, and people don't trust their instincts. So part of the spiritual path is to trust your heart to a certain extent. We all need guidance, but to trust your instincts about a person, but they need to be informed by the Sharia and the Sunnah, and you need to know what the path is about, and so on. You need to have some knowledge. But if you look at these people, you can fall in love with them because their character is so beautiful. They're marked by incredibly beautiful character, generosity, humility, kindness, and you know, people sometimes confuse majesty with someone who's tough or, you know, unpleasant or something. That's not the people who are majestic are also incredibly beautiful, and the people who are incredibly beautiful, I'm talking about the awliya, or the people who are incredibly beautiful are also majestic. So there's this balance, you know. Anyway, so once you're in that environment, if you're lucky enough to be blessed enough to be with these people, it becomes pretty easy. You understand. But it also depends on how much need you're in, how much you really feel a need to have that life. If you're completely embroiled in the world outside and self-satisfied and you think everything's fine, then maybe you won't meet anybody like that, you know.
Okay. A Franciose fez uma pergunta ligada a essa questão, e quando você pensa que encontrou um sheik e se decepciona profundamente por uma atitude desse sheik ou de pessoas que estão à sua volta?
Yeah, this is a trending subject right now, and I understand it. I think the first thing is it depends. If you need to be grounded in the Sharia and in Aqidah and in usul al-fiqh, a little bit of it, so you understand if somebody is going off, if they're violating the Sharia, or if they're doing something haram, or if their adab is wrong, Abu Yazid al-Bistami, who was the great early medieval wali, he heard that there was someone who was a wali in another town. So he went all the way to see this man. And when he came out of his quarters in the mosque, he spat on the floor. And Abu Yazid said, I turned around and didn't even greet him. I left. Allah would not bust that way. That's it. You know, so if you understand, if you know the Sharia, if someone is doing something wrong, and it's a subtle thing, and you can walk away. And part of the path, this is part of the path. It's being disappointed. I read one of the shuyukh made an incredible, very strange statement, which I read, and it was like this: that he who wants to tread this path of ours must first follow the liars from among its people. And he said, this is a sunnah of Allah, and there's no changing the sunnah of Allah. Okay, so I thought, that's a very strange statement. And I asked Sayyid Omar Abdullah about this. I said, what does that mean? You know, he said, it means that you're following the path for Allah and not a person. Not a person. These people, they're people, first of all. They're not infallible. This is the first rule of the path, that the shuyukh are not infallible. They can make mistakes. It doesn't mean usually, I mean, there's no such thing as, Graham Greene, the author Graham Greene, he had this idea of the evil saint, someone who's like completely debauched and degraded, but has this saintly quality. And that's, not in our universe. These people are, they're not depraved but if someone does something wrong, and it's manifestly wrong and it violates the Sharia, walk away. There are a lot of people who go through this thing, and they're traumatized by it. And to be perfectly honest, I don't have that much sympathy for them, because usually, if you're disappointed, you learn something. They say success is a bad teacher. Okay, so being disappointed, you walk. But if you compromise what if you're doing something haram because someone told you, or you're hurting somebody, or you're being violated, you violate someone else's whatever, there's so many permutations to this, and you do it, well, then you don't have anyone but yourself to blame. I mean, that's it's because it's very easy. You just walk away. You see something wrong, be like Abu Yazid al-Bistami and say, not even, just walk away and you'll be fine. You learn something from it. So, and then sometimes you have very wonderful awliya who have followers who misbehave, and that's a different kind of thing. But this is why you need to know usul al-fiqh, and if you see a sheikh and he's claiming to be infallible, that if you don't do what I say, you're not a Muslim or something like that, I'd get out of town. I'd take the first bus out of town and get away from that. And the other thing to remember is that these people, they actually don't do anything. You think that the sheikh does it. It's Allah that does it. Sheikh is like anything else, he's among the asbab of Allah, and he's the difference is like what Mullah Hashim said to me was that it's like at the beginning, the sheikh is like someone who is with a baby, holding them, taking care of them, watching, making sure you don't you don't get yourself in trouble or do something stupid. And only when the murid is ready, then the sheikh kind of just adjusts him. And they usually do this through dhikr or through something, you know, through dhikr or through ibadah of some sort. And they just give you that thing, and then it tips you over the, you know, to the next level or something. There's too much, people are too traumatized with it. And I noticed this trend started happening with the Me Too movement, especially among women, because there are guys out there who've done some, you know, been misbehaving, you know, shuyukh and everything. But I noticed that it coincided with the Me Too movement, which made me suspicious about, you know, where this is coming from. There's too much talk about it, and too much. Actually, I'm in the process of trying to write a book that includes that whole issue of spiritual authority and what you do and so on. I don't know when I'm going to finish that, but it is an issue. It's an important issue because the people can lose faith over it, and it's usually because they misunderstand the whole thing of the path itself.
Uma pergunta que talvez muitas mulheres que leem o livro, né, quando lerem, vão ver muitas histórias de homens santos, mas eu gostaria de saber sobre as mulheres santas. Eu sei que numa sociedade segregada, quando você foi para o Marrocos, as suas experiências, provavelmente você não teve acesso direto a elas, mas você ouviu falar de mulheres santas, ou de repente a sua esposa teve contato com mulheres incríveis também que tenham passado esse amor para ela, ensinado sobre essa aproximação com Deus numa perspectiva feminina. Elas existem, elas são acessíveis. Eu gostaria que você comentasse um pouco sobre o assunto.
Yes. Well, what you said is exactly, I mean, I have to start by saying the only criticism that I've received for the book, and also my friend Peter Sanders has received similar criticisms for his book, is the absence of women, or the in his case, the small number of women that he was able to photograph. And it is because of this segregation, of gender segregation. There, according to the Awliya, there are an equal number of women saints and men saints at any given time. They're equal. There's an equal number. So there are many, many women's Awliya. However, it's not only the gender segregation, it's the fact that, and Ibn Arabi addresses this issue, that the women saints are in the station of the Siddiqeen, which is an extremely high station. And this prohibits them from being known. It's part of the sort of malamatiya where you get nothing from the world. This is not to say that that they don't exist and they're not known to some people, but it's very difficult. I asked Mullah Hashim Belghiti about this, and he laughed and he said, it's hard enough to find men saints. It's impossible to find women saints. They're there, and if one is lucky, one may have some contact with them, but they're very hidden. And many of them, you may be sitting next to someone, as a woman, you may be sitting next to someone who's a great waliya, and you won't know because they're not there. But I think I feel sad that women awliya are not known. One of the books that we're preparing for the series of biographies that we're working on is on Sayyidah Fatma Yashrutiya, who was a great Shazali waliya, who I think she died in 1979, if I'm not mistaken. And we're going to address this issue of women saints. One other thing that I think is important to point out is that in the path, the spiritual path of Islam is genderless. It is neutral, and to the extent that women on the path are referred to as Rijal Allah, they're referred to as men of Allah, but men in the sense that has no gender. Allah refers to himself in the male gender, but he has no gender. So women are literally referred to as Rijal. So this is something to be aware of. I mean, we're now getting into all this gender politics and all of this. We're not part of any of that conversation. Has nothing to do with what we're about. So women and men are completely equal on the path, but it is regrettably we don't have contact with many of these people. I think in Hadramaut, there are the Hababa, they're the women saints in Hadramaut, and some of them are known. I mean, I've heard of them, but I've never met them. And I don't think I have a feeling that most men have never met them either. You know, they're still hidden away. And maybe if you're lucky, if you're a woman, you're lucky, you can sit with them or something.
A próxima pergunta, já antecipando algo que provavelmente vai aparecer para nós aqui na editora, que é, ao ler o seu livro, a gente se sente inspirado a procurar pessoas como as que estão descritas no livro. Então, eu gostaria de um conselho, o que você... Como que nós poderíamos conhecer pessoas tão especiais, assim, como que você acha que a gente poderia ter acesso a pessoas assim?
Well, first of all, I think you have to begin the journey is an inward journey. So you have to start from a need. You have to feel in great need and almost desperation to travel in this way. And we live in a very mobile society now, and people, travel all over the place, and they have options that perhaps people didn't have in other times. But I think you have to travel to meet these people if you know who they are, and if is a good thing, because you're going out of your way. My dear friends and companions in Marrakesh, they just traveled to Oujda, which is about 1,000 kilometers away from Marrakesh, to see the last surviving Muqaddam of Sidi Muhammad ibn al-Habib, who I remember quite vividly because he was very intimidating when I was young. He's about 95 years old. And he said, when they came, he said, "We are the dirt under your feet." And they said, "Sheikh, how can that be?" He said, "You have traveled long distances to see us. So we're the dirt under your feet." To meet those people, I would encourage anyone to try to meet these people. Mustafa Badawi, in the book that he's written for us for our series, the last statement he makes is, don't, these are people now that we're writing about are sort of legendary people. And he said, find these people who are living before they pass. So I would encourage anyone to do that, but you have to. It's not spiritual tourism. It's something you do from the heart, and also to find the right person to meet, to find authentic people. You need to not vet them. That's a terrible word to say about the awliya, but you need to make sure that the people you're going to visit are authentic, and you do that by coming to someone like me. I've been around for a while. I know a few people, and sitting with, and also it isn't that you have to sit with the great grand sheikh or the Sultan al-Awliya or something like that. it's somebody who's been on the path for a long time. Take knowledge from wherever you can. You know, it's you know, like my friend Hamza Yusuf, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. When he was young, he ventured out into Mauritania in deserts. Nobody, you know, I don't know how he even found his sheikh. But you know that I know him pretty well. I mean, he's a dear friend, and he was desperate. I can tell you that when he set out on the path, he was in a state of desperation. He had to find someone to help him, to guide him, and so on. And so he was led in that direction, which is extraordinary. I mean, I'm too spoiled and lazy, I think, to have done something like that. But so I think you start with the heart, you start with the intention. Ask Allah. There's a dua that the shuyukh give to seekers. Allahumma dulani ala min yadulani alayk. Allah, guide me to the one who can guide me to you. And I think that if you want to meet someone who can help you, recite that dua and ask Allah to guide you, because Allah is the guide ultimately, you know, and He's right with us all the time. We just don't see. We're not aware of His presence, which is the whole point of the path. And that's what the awliya do, is they make you feel the presence of Allah.
A gente tem uma pergunta do participante Giovanni, que ele gostaria de saber se você conhece algum grande auliá da nova geração no Marrocos, e complementando essa pergunta, eu gostaria de saber também se de repente em Istambul também tem do Novo Santo, se a gente só conhece da geração.
Well, I'm a recluse. I don't, and particularly now in this pandemic, I haven't really been away from my house for a year, you know, so I haven't seen, but to answer the first question, in Morocco, again, my connection, I go to, you know, I've been going to Morocco for nearly 50 years, and I haven't seen that much of it, to be honest, you know, as a traveler, because I go sit with the people of the path and go home, you know. Sometimes I'll go for 3 days and leave, you know. I mean, so I'm probably not the best person to ask about that. I'm sure there are awliya. I know a sheikh from West Africa who is young, sort of young, middle-aged person. But I have to say, I don't know any really young shuyukh that I would could attest to. But that's me, because I'm really socially challenged, maybe a little bit. You know, I don't get out, and there are great awliya in Istanbul I know of, and I've met one or two of them, and they're remarkable people. So they're everywhere. People sort of romanticize Morocco. Morocco is a rough place. There are incredible awliya, but as I said, the whole environment has declined. There's very little interest, and I mean, there are awliya in Hadramaut. There are awliya everywhere. You'll find people, but I'm probably not the best source of it. And I think that you have to start with the heart and take what you can. Keep good company. Are you all in the same town, or are you in different parts of your country?
Well, mostly in different parts. Some of us are in the same town, but mostly we're all very, very far apart.
Stay in contact. Look, I have... you know, the fuqara, in absence of the sheikh, the fuqara become like a collective sheikh. And the people that I know on the path, I've known for nearly 50 years. They're friends that I have, and it's more than a friendship. They're they're my teachers. They're people, and I've seen them grow and develop and deepen. And you stay together. We do. We every Saturday. Well, today actually every Saturday, we have a gathering from people from all over the world who gather and do the wird of Ibn Habib every Saturday, and we have about 70 people that come from all over the world, from New Zealand and Japan and different places. And we've kept it. I thought it would fizzle out after we started it in the pandemic, and I thought it would fizzle out after a month or two. People would get bored. It's like this is a lifeline for people. So stay together, keep company as much as you can, keep in touch, and one thing will lead to another, because everything is from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Everything, every blink of the eye, every breath you take, every movement, every coincidence, every single thing is from Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. And what we want is to be aware of that. Ibn Ata'illah al-Iskandari, he said that the ghafil, the heedless person, is the one who plans what he's going to do with his day. And the dhakir, the one who remembers Allah, is the one who sees what Allah is doing with him. And life becomes much simpler if you ask Allah, turn your affairs over to Allah. And anyone can do it. It's not some special person. You just have to sort of do it. You practice it. You turn everything over to Allah, and then step back and see what Allah is doing with you. See what happens, and you might be surprised. So regarding the people of the path, if you keep to the people that are in front of you, and then have good intentions. I mean, it's like Uwais al-Qarani. Uwais al-Qarani never met the Rasulullah because he had to take care of his mother. And yet, when he met Sayyidina Ali and Sayyidina Omar, he asked them to describe him. He said, "You haven't seen him." He'd seen him. So it's this idea of travel. Travel is good. Travel is great. You can learn a lot from travel. But some of the shayukhs, why are you going to the house of Allah and traveling across the world when the house of Allah is inside you? So it's both things. If you can travel and you can meet someone, this is a good thing with the right intention. But also, if you serve each other and serve people, help people. Ibn Ata'illah, I'm sorry, I'm going on a bit, but Ibn Ata'illah, in the Al-Hikam, and I'm paraphrasing this very roughly, but he said, don't keep company with anyone who cannot raise your state. People sometimes misunderstand this because they think, well, I only keep company with someone who's superior to me, someone higher than I am. That's not true. What it means is that if you're helping someone, that raises your state. So if someone comes in and they need to learn how to make wudu, and you know how to make wudu, you do this. And what you see I heard a story of one of the Fuqara who I knew of Muhammad ibn Habib, a young Englishman. He came very young, and Ibn Habib was about 100 years old at the time. And, had thousands of followers, and a great saint and scholar. And he came down and sat with this young convert and taught him Kul Hu Allahu Ahad. This is what these people are like. They're helping. They're always there helping you. They're always there for you, to help you. And that's a dynamic. So you don't have to travel around the world. If you can help somebody, Allah mawjood. And then one thing leads to another. So it's that interaction, and you have a group, we have like 20, 21 people gathering together help each other, help other people, be kind, follow the sunnah and be, and one thing will lead to another. There's no question, because Allah is present with us right now, and we just don't see. We need to. And the way that you do this is through dhikr Allah, through remembering Allah and reminding one another.
Cid Harun, agora eu gostaria de saber sobre os seus livros, né? Recentemente você lançou o livro Horizontes. Se você puder falar um pouco sobre ele também, inshallah, a gente pretende lançar. E o que mais está por vir, se você tem planos para outros livros, acho que você comentou de 2, mas se puder falar um pouquinho mais sobre ele.
Yeah. Well, Heart's Turn it sort of evolved out of book tours I made when I published Signs on the Horizons. And I met many, as I said, I'm kind of reclusive. I don't meet a lot of people. And this put me in contact with many young Muslims who I was really very impressed by, but I was also distressed a bit by their lack of confidence and insecurity in Islam, and particularly over the issue of sinning, because young people expressed to me, that they'd done something, they'd committed something wrong, or they'd done a sin, or they'd done something, and they felt that they were kind of doomed to perdition or purgatory or something like that. And I realized that the Muslims have lost the understanding of what tawbah is. Because tawbah, it's translated into English generally as repentance, which is a word that sort of connotes an absolute, something absolute, and you repent of your sins, that sort of thing. Whereas tawbah actually means to turn or to relent. So it's a dynamic word, it's a constant word. And the Prophet ﷺ said, if you did not sin, meaning the Muslims, Allah would destroy you and replace you with the people who sinned so that they can make tawbah. So tawbah is our default condition. We're supposed to do things wrong, and it's just a sense of refinement. And everyone is required to make tawbah, even the saints, even the awliya. But the difference between the tawbah of the wali and the tawbah of an ordinary person is that the ordinary person repents from gross misbehavior and sinning and that sort of thing. And the wali repents from forgetting Allah for a second, for an instant. So it's a process, it's a constant process. The heart is constantly turning over and over. And that's part of the path. That's a huge part of the path. I wanted to get that across, but I wanted to do it in a way that was accessible for a reader. And so what I did was I interviewed dozens of people and about their story of turning, of changing their, because I'm not very interested in conversion stories. I find them not very interesting, to be honest. But I am interested in the trajectory of someone's life, how one's life changes in the time that someone's alive. And so I knew a number of stories that were really amazing stories, and I started with those, and then I moved into, and I tried to cover some different kinds of areas, different experiences people had. Some people, one of the stories is a story of a pimp, a guy who was a pimp in the U.S. who became a professor, and he ended up in prison, and he became a Muslim in prison, and so on. So that's one story. But there are stories of, of people who already had a spiritual orientation, who were already sort of engaged in one way or another, and how they came closer, to Allah. So I tried to cover a lot of different aspects of that process of tawbah to sort of show the reader, something. And I've had a really strong, response to the book, because I think it's fun to read, which was the idea behind it. It's not. It's a lot of. It's a kind of. Because there's some funny aspects. There's some funny parts to it, and heart-rending parts as well.
If you could talk about other projects for the future.
Well, right now, Peter Sanders and I are working on a series of biographies of Awliya that's being funded by the John Templeton Foundation as exemplars. So we're compiling biographies by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, Dr. Mustafa Badawi. I've written one or two. Dr. Karim Ham, different authors have written about the different people, or are in the process of writing about these, and there'll be 9 to 12 volumes that we're launching in 2022 in August. In July 2022. And there'll be illustrated biographies of this. So this is a big project for us. We're working on that. I'm also working on a book on getting to the path, which I mentioned before, but I don't know when that's going to come out. But right now I'm engaged in two things. I'm writing a book on film. But it's really addressing a Muslim audience rather than a general audience. So that I'm in the midst of that, and I'm having fun with it. I have a background in film, and this was something that several of my friends have been sort of pushed me to do. And I was reluctant to get into it, but now that I'm doing it, I can see some value in it. So I'm doing that, and I'm recording Signs on the Horizons as an audible book, and then I'm trying to prepare the second edition of Signs on the Horizon. So I've got a lot on my plate right now. It's I'm trying to get as much done, take advantage of the pandemic as much as I can.
Ok.
Por último, agradeço imensamente, foi de muito proveito. Eu gostaria de saber se você teria algum conselho para nos dar para a nova geração de muçulmanos, se tem algo que tenha sido esquecido, que tenha desaparecido, né, do horizonte dos novos muçulmanos.
I once asked Dr. Mustafa Badawi, who's a psychiatrist, what the primary cause of insanity was. And his answer, I wasn't expecting his answer, but I should have. It was so obvious. He said it's the denial of death. And I thought, well, that, of course, that's the most insane thing. It's the only thing we know with absolute certainty. And I think young people today, because we're so caught up in the world is so overpowering now. Sometimes it takes young people 20 years to find out what they want to do for a living. It absorbs you. It takes you. It takes your life. And the thing that I think we need to recapture is the awareness that the world is passing. The world is passing. It's not you. If you're young, if you're 30 years old or 20 years old, you think you have a long time to live. We all go through this, and you'll find that when you're 20, suddenly you become 40. and you can't believe it. And then when you're 40, you're 60. And you know, I've known my neighbor and friend Shams Friedlander for 40 years. He's 81 years old now. You know, I knew him when he was young and his hair was black. People knew me when my hair was black. So the world is, we spend so much time setting ourselves up in the world, trying to do the right thing. It's time for us to remember Allah. Remembrance is the cure. It's the cure for everything. We need to reorder our priorities. Doesn't mean that you drop out of life and you stop functioning, but you need to make dhikr Allah your priority. You need to retrieve your heart. Ibn Ata'illah in his Hikam wrote that the heedless one who is the one who plans what he's going to do with his day, and the one who remembers Allah sees what he's going to do with him. We need to turn to Allah and turn all our problems to Allah. And if you do this, you will see, if you're able to do this, if you practice it, you will see how things work out for you. Things fall into place because Allah is the one who determines everything. So that's the thing that you need to retrieve, is this sense of the evanescence of life, of the passing of life, and don't mourn it. Glorify it, because the end is meeting Allah, and you know, we ask Allah to have shauqi illa liqa'ik, you know, shauq in for the meeting with Allah, the desire to meet Allah. So this is what we need to get back to as soon as possible. Don't delay. Don't say, well, I'm only 40. You know, I have a long way to go. Life passes too quickly. So that would be my advice. That's my parting shot.